Hello. Alright, so we're going to start part 2 of episode 7.
That is all affirmative evidence that Avery was in possession of the key, yet there is no affirmative evidence to prove that Lenk was ever in possession of it. In fact, the only link making a murderer or the defense ever provide is speculation based on a single phone call to dispatch that Andrew Colborne might have seen the car before it was discovered by a volunteer searcher on November 5th.
Okay, he's talking about Stephen's DNA being found on Teresa's key that was found in his bedroom. That actually does not prove that Stephen had that key. It just proves that his DNA was found on the key, and that being in his house really isn't all that surprising or hard. That if someone could get into his house to put the key, they could also get his DNA. And if you want to keep calling it sweat, whatever, like I said before, he's a hardworking guy. He probably had plenty of dirty, sweaty clothes laying around. You know, he wasn't the best housekeeper, apparently. So how hard would that be to rub a dirty t-shirt or something on the key? Not hard. Rub something like that on the hood latch.
That's it. That's the only evidence that Lenk ever had possession of the key. That his co-worker and supposed co-conspirator called dispatch to verify the license plate number of Halbach's car, and it kind of sounded like he might have been looking at the car at the time.
It didn't kind of sound like it. It really sounded like it. Like I said before, I can't think of any reasonable explanation for him to have been calling in those plates on the day she was reported missing. If anybody else has an idea that is reasonable, that's not he was just calling to confirm, I mean, please share. Like I said, I am trying to be objective and reasonable and logical about it, and I can't, neither could the defense, and just can't think of a reasonable explanation for him calling in the plates on that night unless he had seen that car. So
Yet from that mere suggestion that it sort of sounded like Colborne was looking at the car, the defense infers that he found the car, withheld this information from other investigators, took the car to the Avery property in an effort to frame him for Halbach's murder, and then gave the key to Lenk to put Avery's DNA evidence on, and then plant in Avery's bedroom.
okay, it's not, no one has ever said that Lenk or Colburn used that key to move her car. It is possible that they did, but it is also possible that they found it on the property already. Nobody really knows. The only way to maybe know anything like that is, again, to get Colburn's phone records for his cell phone that he used to call into dispatch, and see if you can possibly find some ping going on there to find out where he was. He should have been off duty at 8 o'clock. I know that he did say that he got off duty a little later than that because he drops off his car back at the police station or at the sheriff's office and picks up his personal car and goes home. He said that night on November 3rd that after he got off duty, he dropped off his police car, got in his personal car, went home, and fell asleep watching TV on the couch. Sure, prove it. I mean, phone records, cell phone tower pings, something to show us that, you were not at the Avery property, for example, or at the quarry, or somewhere in the location where she might have been found. Especially at the Avery property. I mean, I would love to see the phone records just to see, because I don't like to believe that the police would do something like this, but it really does seem like they did at least plant some evidence. You just cannot get over that key. That's the hardest one for me to explain.
That's quite a logical leap, but it's nothing compared to the aspersions the defense casts against the FBI, whose testing for a chemical known as EDTA crushed the narrative that blood from the vial in the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department was planted at the various crime scenes. Rebutting, and by extension making a murderer, reveal their inherent bias against the FBI back in episode 5.
I don't trust the FBI at all, and I think that they're going to come up with some dishonest test that somehow claims that the blood in the vial is different than what was found at the scene.
Naturally, no one from the FBI is ever interviewed to counter this very serious accusation of deceitfulness. It merely hangs out there to set the agency up as perhaps being in on this ever-growing conspiracy to frame Stephen Avery.
Okay, naturally, I don't know this for sure because I've never actually heard the filmmakers reply on this specifically, but I do know that they did several times repeatedly offer for everyone else involved to participate. They wrote letters. They have these letters in their files to prove that they did. I don't know that they did that with the FBI guy that testified, but the problem with this EDTA test is that if you would listen to what I believe it was Strang was saying, that they would have to, and I don't know if it was Rebutting or Strang, sorry, they would have to recalibrate their equipment, and this is a test that would normally take months to complete, something they haven't done in 10 years, and yet they got it done in just a couple of weeks. So yeah, it's a little bit hard to know if they got the parameters correct to detect what could be a very small amount of EDTA. Who knows how much is left in a vial from 1985? I don't know. I don't know that for sure. I'm definitely not an expert on any of that stuff. But I have an alternate theory for how it's possible, or two actually. I have two alternate theories on how it's possible that Stephen's blood without EDTA got into Teresa's car. I'll just try to go over this really quick because, like I said, it's just my personal feelings and just a theory. I definitely do not have any facts, obviously, to back it up. I can't prove anything, but just saying there are other ways that it could have gotten there. This is the most reasonable one to me. Whoever was planting all this other evidence, whoever murdered Teresa, probably, since they had already decided they're going to frame Stephen, probably was very well aware of that cut on his finger. It was a pretty nasty cut that, to me, looked like it needed stitches. It was pretty gross. It had to be bleeding heavily. I know that he had it wrapped with something, and you get into his house and you find that wrap, or find, something that he used to get that blood. I don't see why they would not be able to wet it and smear some blood around her car, drip it, and make some blood drops with his blood from that wrap. Now also, Stephen's Grand Am was taken to the crime lab also, so if you want to say that the crime lab was involved, I guess that's possible. The blood where Stephen had been driving his car with that cut, he had blood all over the damn car that he told them about, and they knew that it was there. So it is, I guess it is also possible that they could have taken a sample from there, put it over into Teresa's car, because nobody saw it at the scene. Nobody saw the blood at the scene on the property. It was all seen once they got it to the crime lab. That brings up another very interesting problem I have here, And if anybody has this answer, please, please put my mind at ease. I have posted this on Reddit. I've posted this on several of the Stephen Avery, Brendan Dassey pages, trying to see if anyone has found any documentation of where, how, who unlocked Teresa's driver's side door. Because we know that Nicole Sturm tried to open the doors with the tissue, that she tried all the doors, they were locked. We know that Ertl, the crime lab guy from Madison, when he got there, he tried to open the doors as well. They're all locked. We know that the tow truck driver had to unhook the front, whatever it's called, I don't fucking remember. Sorry, he had to unhook the front something or other, so drive shaft, I think, so that the front wheels would turn so he could tow the car and put it onto the trailer, because he was not able to get into the car to put it into neutral because it was locked. Next thing we know, the man who, Groffy, the photographer, the crime lab photographer in Madison, he was called in on his day off and told by his supervisor that he would be one of the first people to see the vehicle, the RAV4. He says when he got there, this is in his testimony, he says when he arrived, the driver's side door was already unlocked. All the doors were still closed, but the door was unlocked. All the other doors were still locked. He had to reach across to unlock the passenger side door and reach back to unlock the other doors. I have no idea how he unlocked the trunk door without crawling inside. I don't think he talks about how he unlocked the trunk, but it doesn't matter. The important thing is, if anyone knows where it's documented, because something like that should be documented, who unlocked that door, how did they unlock that door? And believe me, I know police have Slim Jims, they have other ways to unlock doors, I know that, but this should be documented. This is a major piece of evidence, a very important piece of evidence, and how it's handled, every single thing that's done to that car should be documented very carefully, and how it came to be unlocked is very interesting to me, and I would like to know where that information is, because I have yet to find it, and I've yet to have anyone on any of the places I've posted that question be able to come up with an answer or show me where that's documented. So please, if you know, let me know, because I think it's a big deal, and I think it's something. So help me out. That'd be awesome.
First, Making a Murderer tries to claim that the FBI rushed its EDTA test.
How are you going to deal with the issue that in December you were told this was going to take 4 to 6 months, which would have been way too late to present at this trial, and then all of a sudden they got it done in a couple of days?
Well, it wasn't a couple of days. I think, I don't see it as a problem.
And he's right. Even if the state asked for the test in December, the FBI would have had upwards of 3 months to get its procedures set up by late February or early March. That's not too far off from the initial 4 to 6 month estimate, and it's not evidence in and of itself that there's anything inherently wrong with the testing procedure. It just means that the development of the test took less time than initially estimated. And why? Because there was a specific need for it. It's natural for people to move just a little quicker if they know they're on a deadline, and FBI researchers knew that they were on a deadline to get the test ready for a trial whose outcome could hinge on it. The defense makes a great deal out of the fact that in asking for that test, the prosecution never even entertains the possibility that it could be used to prove that a law enforcement officer planted evidence. But why would the prosecution suggest this? No one other than Stephen Avery and his defense attorneys were at the time suggesting that evidence had been planted, and neither Avery nor his attorneys had to that point, or for that matter, by any point, shown any real evidence that law enforcement had been planting evidence at all. Making a Murderer starts with the presumption that the test is crooked, though, and this is important because the test shows that there was no EDTA in any of the samples that it tested.
Now I'd like to ask...
Okay, their results showed no EDTA. But if you look at the testimony of the defense witness, expert witness, she says, first of all, the FBI was only sent 3 of the 6 samples. I don't know what that means. And do we know where those 3 samples came from? Were they samples from Stephen Avery's car? Were they actually samples from Teresa's car? Because we know that at least the blood in Stephen Avery's car was from him actively bleeding from that cut that he said. But we don't know where those 3 samples that were sent to the FBI came from for sure. We know obviously they're supposed to have come from the RAV4, but then why weren't all 6 of the samples sent to the FBI? That's just questionable, and that's something to, I guess, to wonder. We don't know. We can't know that for sure. But the defense's witness says, after the FBI agent says, or whatever he is, says that he can definitively say that there is no EDTA in any of the blood samples in Teresa's RAV4 and Stephen Avery's blood, just going by 3 of the 6 samples. And she's like, I'm not in the business of guessing. I need scientific evidence to back this up before I could say that for sure. And you would think that the FBI would be a little bit more careful about saying something so concretely, this is a fact, when they know that they don't even have all of the samples that were available. They have half of the samples. So, they also did not take the samples themselves, so they don't know if they even came from the RAV4. So saying that there is no EDTA in the blood samples that was found in the RAV4 is really not possible for them to say 100% for sure. And I don't like that he said that. And I love how Rebutting says, okay, I just want to see how far you were willing to go. I love that he said that, because that is, kind of pushing it. He's trying to do the same thing that Culhane was, put Stephen Avery in the house or in the garage, or I'm sorry, put Teresa in Stephen's house or in Stephen's garage, that sort of thing. Put Stephen Avery in Teresa's car with no EDTA in that sample. There's just too many possibilities, and it just raises a question. And I think that there are so many questions, somebody really should just not jump so fast to assume that it's all accurate, that somebody's not tampering with something. It is possible.
Thank you, Doctor. What was your thought process in approaching this case that was sent to you? There's going to be 1 or 2 scenarios when you're dealing with the notion that blood was planted from an EDTA tube. First scenario is that if you find the presence of EDTA on that blood stain, then that's an indication that that blood came from a tube, such as purple top tube. The other scenario is that you do not find EDTA, and that would then suggest that the blood came from active bleeding and not from an EDTA preserved tube. Were you able to reach a conclusion concerning the presence of EDTA on the blood swabs that you tested from Teresa Halbach's RAV4 that were sent to you in this case?
Yes, sir. And we were not able to identify any indication of the presence of EDTA in any of the swabs that were submitted to our laboratory and were reported to us as being collected from the RAV4.
Do you have an opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, whether the blood stains from Teresa Halbach's RAV4 that you tested came from the vial of blood of Stephen Avery that was in the Manitowoc County Clerk of Court's office?
It's my opinion that the blood stains that reflected from the RAV4 could not have come from the EDTA tube that was provided to us in this case.
That statement was devastating to the defense, as it seemed to confirm that the blood found in Halbach's car in fact came from Avery, who the defense stipulated had an open cut on his finger the day Halbach disappeared. The defense is reduced to questioning the integrity and accuracy of the EDTA test because its supposed ace in the hole that would have proved that someone took blood out of the vial and planted it to frame Avery. Remember the tiny little hole at the top of the vial?
Little tiny hole.
Falls flat upon closer examination.
Let me tell you, this is a red letter day for the defense. It could not have been better.
There's a reason that the hole is never again mentioned in Making a Murderer after Buting first finds it, and it's not because it's evidence that someone other than the laboratory that drew the blood poked a hole in the cover of the vial. It's because the hole was a part of the vial itself. The vial is actually called a vacutainer and needs a hole in its top. That top is known as a hemoguard. When a needle is inserted into a vein to draw blood, pressure differential sucks the blood from the needle into the vacutainer. As such, the vacutainer needs to have a small needle hole in it because it is where the blood transfers from the needle in the arm into the vacutainer.
Okay, I'm just going to stop him because very conveniently he did not add the testimony of the defense witness who said that, like I said before, that when you test for EDTA, if you find the presence of EDTA, you can obviously say that EDTA was present in that sample. If you do not find EDTA, then you cannot for sure say that there is no EDTA in that sample. All you can say is that it was not detected. And that could be because, like I said, you've got your parameters set wrong to detect that small of an amount, or it's not there. You don't know for sure either way unless you are able to detect it all the way down to a positive. And that's what the defense's witness said, basically. So she said she could not, if she was to get those same results, she could not, without getting a positive, she could not say for sure that it's not there. All she could say is that it was not detected. Now, as far as the hole being in the top of the purple top tube, yeah, sure. Like he said, when he very first found it, he thought that this was, oh my gosh, this is exciting. This is huge. Shows that somebody put a needle in there to draw some blood out. Because he had already called the LabCorp, I guess, and they had told him that we don't do that. They don't put holes in those tubes. For those samples, I guess they were telling him that they would give a clean lid or something that does not have a hole in it if it's going to be preserved for evidence or something like that. I don't know. But I do know that the information that he was given was exciting. Now, it has been shown a lot that's really common to have a small needle hole in the top of a purple top tube because that's how the blood gets in there. Sure, that makes sense. But if you look at this purple top tube, the size of that hole is pretty big. I've seen a nurse who has done testing on Reddit and posted pictures onto Imager of the different sizes of needles that she had to use to recreate that hole size, and she comes up with a pretty big needle, and also that it's not a pointy needle, it's a flat needle. I can't specifically say what it was called because I don't have that right in front of me, but if you look it up on Reddit, like I said, you'll find that how the big hole was there. Like I said, the nurse who showed pictures of her using different size needles, the pointy top and the pointy ones and the flat ones, to try to recreate the size of that hole. Okay, so that does not mean that all it means is basically that there could have been a small hole that was put there in the top of that tube when it was drawn out of Stephen Avery's arm and taken as a sample. But the size of the hole that's there could mean also that someone inserted another needle to draw out some blood. Also, because of the seal having blood up inside of the seal, someone could have taken the top off and drawn some blood out that way. You know, I don't know. Nobody knows that for sure. The only thing we know for sure is that it was obviously tampered with somehow, because all of the tape, it was not sealed. It was taped back with Scotch tape on the inside and the outside of the box. So that is suspicious. That is questionable. Again, more, how did this happen? Someone needs to explain how this happened, and there is no explanation for this. And that is something that should be documented somewhere, and it is not, obviously. So it's a possibility of how that blood got there.
In other words, the hole was not from someone sticking a needle into the cap to take blood out of the vial. It was from the needle that drew blood from Stephen Avery's arm and transferred it into the vial. Neither the defense nor Making a Murderer ever mention this, and instead leave the needle-sized hole in the vial hanging in the air, as FBI testing shows no presence of EDTA in the blood found in Halbach's car at all. Episode 7 closes with one of the more dramatic moments of the entire trial. Outside of the presence of the jury, Avery explains his decision not to testify in his own defense.
The decision is, I'm an innocent man, and there's no reason for me to testify. Everybody knows I'm innocent.
Of course, a jury may not draw any inference from a defendant exercising his right not to testify at his own trial, but as viewers of a documentary that has supposedly proven his innocence already, we can certainly wonder why Avery wouldn't jump at the chance to proclaim his innocence to a jury, especially since he's spent 7 episodes now doing nothing but proclaiming his innocence everywhere. Except, of course, where his words would be challenged.
Okay. It is really not unusual for someone who's being charged with murder to not testify at their own trial. The attorneys usually will advise not to testify. Of course, it is up to the client to testify if they want to. I'm sure that Stephen had no reason not to trust Dean and Jerry's advice. Now, who knows why? Who knows why they would suggest him not to testify? You could only guess. What are we hearing now since the documentary came out? Well, the cat. He burned the cat because he was accused of possibly raping some other girl. Even though no charges were brought, he could have old things brought up, like when he ran his cousin off the road and held a gun to her. I mean, that specifically is probably the thing that made the defense attorneys say you probably should not testify, because they're not going to bring this stuff up, hopefully, as long as you're not there. I don't see a problem with him not testifying. Of course, to a jury, what do we want to see? We want to see the defendant talk. We want to know him. We want to get a feeling of who he is, and if we feel like he committed this murder, just by listening to him talk, listening to his answers, watching his behavior, watching his body language, listening to how he answers, making up your own mind by listening to him testify. A jury wants to hear that. Unfortunately, a lot of times they don't get to. but that's just how it was, and I don't think that that was wrong. Dean and Jerry are really, really, really good attorneys and very smart, and they did an amazing job. As far as I'm concerned, watching the trial, reading the transcripts, which, you know, I've read quite a bit of them, not completely done, but every step of the way, especially just watching Making a Murderer, every step of the way, the defense is slapping down everything the prosecution's saying. They're winning the whole way, as far as I'm concerned. Everything they say makes a lot more sense. Their experts are making a lot more sense. Everything that the prosecution is saying is just circumstantial evidence. It is theories. It's whatever. It's filled with a bunch of shit. Sorry. I mean, it just is. It's nothing is proven. Nothing is concrete. There is no hard evidence that links Stephen to killing Teresa. There is none. If you know of any that I don't, let me know. I don't believe it's there. It's not there. There's more evidence to suggest that he did not kill her than there is to suggest that he did. But anyway, we're going to finish this up and go on to the next episode.